The sound of silverware clinking against fine china plates echoed through the Blackwood family dining room. Avery Blackwood sat quietly, her posture perfect but uncomfortable, like a student forced to balance a book on her head. At 34, the literature teacher had mastered the art of appearing composed while her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Across the table, her mother-in-law, Marcella Blackwood, smiled with practiced grace. The corners of her mouth turned up while her eyes remained cold. At 63, Marcella was still striking silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture as rigid as the family's expectations. "More roast?" "Avery," Marcella asked, her voice honeyed with false concern. "You've barely touched your food." "I'm fine, thank you," Avery replied, maintaining her smile. 6 years of marriage to Thaddeus had taught her to wear pleasantness like armor. Her husband, Thaddeus, sat at the head of the table, methodically cutting his meat as if solving a geometry problem. At 36, he was handsome in a classical way, sharp jaw, clear blue eyes, sandy blonde hair beginning to recede slightly at the temples. He ate with the determined focus of someone avoiding conversation. Griffin Blackwood, her father-in-law, nodded occasionally at whatever Marcella said, his large frame hunched slightly, a retired banking executive who now existed primarily in his wife's shadow. His eyes rarely met Avery's. Only Wren, Thaddeus's younger sister, seemed uncomfortable with the tension. At 29, she fidgeted with her napkin, her gaze fixed on her plate. "I was telling Beatrice Holloway about Orion's piano recital," Marcella continued, addressing everyone but looking at Avery. "She was quite impressed that he's playing Chopin at 7. I told her it must be the Blackwood genes." Avery nodded politely, though the comment stung. Marcella never missed an opportunity to erase Avery's contribution to her son's accomplishments. The implication was always clear: Orion succeeded despite Avery, not because of her. "He practices very hard," Avery said simply. "Yes, well, natural talent needs discipline," Marcella replied. "Speaking of discipline, Thaddeus mentioned you've been having some difficulty with your students lately." Avery felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't mentioned any such thing to Thaddeus. In fact, her sophomore literature class had just finished an exceptional poetry unit. Before she could respond, she felt her phone vibrate in her lap. Discreetly, she glanced down. Unknown number. The message made her blood run cold. "Don't react. They're recording you." Avery's heart hammered against her ribs, but she maintained her expression, years of teaching teenagers having perfected her poker face. Her eyes swept the room casually, the new picture frame on the mantel, slightly askew, the wall socket with its slightly crooked cover, the decorative vase that hadn't been there last Sunday. "No difficulties," Avery replied evenly. "My students are doing quite well this semester." "That's not what Thaddeus said," Marcella insisted, her smile sharpening. "He mentioned you've been stressed, overwhelmed even." Thaddeus looked up from his plate momentarily, then back down without comment. Avery took a small sip of water. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Perhaps," Marcella said, her tone suggesting otherwise. "It's just that teaching can be so demanding for someone not accustomed to pressure." The barb was clear. Marcella had never forgiven Avery for her background, for being a scholarship student who'd worked her way through college, for not coming from the right family, as she'd once put it to a friend, unaware that Avery was within earshot. Avery recalled Marcella's words at a dinner party the previous year. Some people only marry to escape their own lives. She'd smiled and poured more wine that night, but inside, she'd crumbled. Now, with the mysterious text message burning in her mind, those past slights took on a more sinister dimension. They weren't just recording her, they were watching, waiting for her to break. As lunch concluded, Avery excused herself to use the restroom. Once alone, she studied the text message again. Who had sent it, and why was it a trap? Or was someone trying to warn her? She stared at her reflection in the mirror. "They're recording you," she whispered to herself, the full weight of those words settling into her bones. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Avery's mood as she moved through the Blackwood family home. After yesterday's lunch and the mysterious text, she'd spent a restless night analyzing every interaction, every sideways glance, every seemingly innocuous comment from the past months. Thaddeus had left early for work, barely speaking to her before departing. Their relationship had grown increasingly distant over the past year, but now Avery wondered if it was more than just the natural cooling of a marriage. Once alone, she began a careful inspection of the house. In the living room, she noticed the picture frame on the mantel. A family portrait from last Christmas was angled differently than usual. She approached it carefully, examining it without touching. The frame was heavier than she remembered, thicker along one edge. In the kitchen, a wall socket seemed slightly misaligned. The medicine cabinet in the guest bathroom had a new decorative box she'd never purchased. The bookshelf in the den had been reorganized. Her collection of Russian literature now on the bottom shelf rather than at eye level where she'd always kept it. Small changes, insignificant in isolation, damning in aggregate. As a literature teacher, Avery was trained to read subtext, to analyze character motivations, to understand the story beneath the story. Now she applied those same skills to her own life, seeing the narrative that had been constructed around her. She took out a small notebook and began documenting everything, careful to maintain her normal routine in case she was being watched. She brewed coffee, graded papers at the dining room table, made a grocery list all while mentally cataloging potential surveillance points. At 3 o'clock, she drove to pick up Orion from school. Her son bounded down the steps, his dark curls so like her own bouncing with each step. He was the perfect blend of her and Thaddeus, her curls and olive complexion, Thaddeus's blue eyes and sharp nose. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, hugging him close. "How was school?" "Good," he said, but his usual enthusiasm seemed muted. "Mrs. Peterson said my science project was the best." "That's wonderful. What was your project about again?" "Plant growth under different biomes," he said. "Grandma helped me with it last weekend." Avery nodded, maintaining her smile though her stomach tightened. Marcella had never mentioned helping with a science project, and Orion hadn't been at his grandparents' house the previous weekend, at least not to Avery's knowledge. "When did Grandma help you with that?" she asked casually as they drove home. Orion looked out the window. "When you were at your meeting." Avery frowned. She hadn't had any meetings outside school hours in weeks. "Which meeting, honey?" "The one Daddy said you had to go to." "Last Tuesday?" Was last Tuesday evening. Avery had been at home grading papers, while Thaddeus took Orion out for guys' time. They'd returned late, and Orion had been unusually quiet the next day. "I see," she said, her voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "Did you have fun at Grandma's?" Orion nodded, then grew quiet. After a moment, he asked in a small voice, "Mom, are you going away?" Avery nearly swerved the car. "Going away? Oh, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" Orion shrugged, looking down at his hands. "No reason." That night, after Orion was asleep, Avery sat on the edge of his bed and gently stroked his curls. "Sweetheart," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear. "What are they telling you?" Later, as she prepared for bed, she found herself checking the corners of rooms, looking for anything unusual. The warning text kept playing in her mind. "Don't react. They're recording you." But why? What were they hoping to capture? What narrative were they constructing? And to what end, as she lay in bed beside Thaddeus, listening to his even breathing, Avery made a decision. If they were watching her, she would watch back, and she would be ready. For 3 nights, Avery waited, feigning sleep until Thaddeus's breathing grew deep and regular. On the 4th night, she silently slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the mattress too much. Thaddeus stirred slightly, but didn't wake. The hardwood floors were cold beneath her bare feet as she padded down the hallway to Thaddeus's home office. The door was closed but unlocked. Thaddeus had never felt the need to lock it, confident in his position as master of the house. Avery eased the door open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. The room was dark except for the blue glow of Thaddeus's computer, which he'd left on. She hesitated in the doorway, heart pounding. This was the point of no return. Until now. She could pretend the text was a prank, her suspicions unfounded. Taking a deep breath, she entered the office and quietly closed the door behind her. The computer screen illuminated Thaddeus's desk, meticulous as always, with files arranged in perfect stacks, his fountain pen collection displayed in a mahogany case. She moved to the computer, careful not to disturb the mouse too much. The screen showed Thaddeus's email, still logged in. She minimized the email window, revealing the desktop, there among the usual folders. One caught her eye, backup AB, her initials. With trembling fingers, she clicked the folder. Inside were dozens of files, organized by date and location. Kitchen 713.move, bedroom 0625.move, bathroom 0702.move, living room 0718.move. Avery felt sick. They weren't just recording her at family gatherings, they were recording her everywhere, in the most private moments of her life. She opened living room 0718.move. The video showed her sitting on the couch, talking on the phone. Her voice was clear through the computer speakers. "I don't know how much longer I can stay in this house. I feel like I'm being watched all the time." She remembered that conversation, a call with her therapist 2 weeks ago. She'd been discussing her increasing anxiety, the feeling of being constantly evaluated and found wanting. She opened another file, kitchen 0713.move. This one showed her washing dishes, then suddenly slamming a plate into the sink. The plate shattered, and she buried her face in her hands. Avery frowned. She did remember breaking a plate, but not like that. She dropped it accidentally while drying it. She certainly hadn't slammed it down in anger. With growing horror, she opened more files, discovering that many had been edited, rearranged, manipulated to paint her as unstable, angry, erratic. In one video, her words from 2 separate conversations had been spliced together to make it sound like she was contemplating leaving Orion. She noticed other irregularities, a shirt she'd worn after a particular conversation appearing in an earlier clip, the lighting changing unnaturally, jump cuts that removed context. They weren't just recording her, they were creating a false narrative. Then she found the worst video of all, Orion room 072.move. The footage showed her son's bedroom. Orion sat on his bed while Marcella perched beside him, stroking his hair much as Avery herself did. "Soon your mommy's going to leave," Marcella said softly, "and the house will be all yours. Won't that be nice? Just you and Daddy and me." Orion looked confused. "But where is Mommy going?" "Sometimes mommies who aren't feeling well need to go away to get better," Marcella said. "But don't worry, we'll take care of you." Tears streamed down Avery's face as she watched. They were turning her son against her, using his innocent trust as a weapon. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore, it was psychological warfare, with her child caught in the crossfire. She wanted to scream, to rage, to confront Thaddeus immediately, but the warning text flashed in her mind. "Don't react. They're recording you." Any emotional outburst would only give them more ammunition. With shaking hands, she connected her external hard drive purchased that afternoon and hidden in her tote bag and began copying files. She worked methodically, careful to note which ones had been edited and how. As the files transferred, a new emotion began to replace her shock and grief determination. They wanted to portray her as unstable. They wanted to take her son. They would learn that beneath the accommodating exterior they so easily dismissed was a woman of intelligence and resolve. They had declared war, but they had underestimated their opponent. The next morning, Avery moved through her routine with mechanical precision, smiling at Thaddeus over breakfast, helping Orion with his backpack, kissing them both goodbye. Her face betrayed nothing of her midnight discovery or the storm raging inside her. Once alone, she drove not to school but to a public library 3 towns over, where no one would recognize her. She found a quiet corner and opened her laptop, connecting to the free Wi-Fi rather than using her own data plan. She couldn't risk leaving digital footprints that could be traced. First, she researched surveillance laws in their state. Recording someone without consent in their own home was illegal, a felony. In fact, but proving it would require evidence that wouldn't implicate her in computer trespassing. Next, she created a new email account under a pseudonym, using it to send the copied files to herself. She used a different password than any she'd ever used before, something Thaddeus could never guess. She researched psychological manipulation, gaslighting, and parental alienation. Recognizing the tactics being used against her with growing clarity, what she was experiencing had a name, had recognized patterns. She wasn't imagining things, and she wasn't alone. By noon, she had a preliminary plan. She needed to secure her evidence, build a legal cell, and protect Orion all while appearing oblivious to their schemes. Her next stop was an electronics store in a shopping center she never frequented. She purchased two small cameras of her own, a voice recorder, and a second external hard drive as backup. The sales clerk raised an eyebrow at her cash payment, but asked no questions. At 1 o'clock, she called the school principal, Dr. Lennox Fairchild, requesting an urgent meeting. By 2, she sat in his office, hands folded in her lap. Acute stress leave, Dr. Fairchild repeated, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Avery, I'm concerned. You've always been one of our most reliable faculty members. I know this seems sudden, Avery said, her voice steady, but I'm dealing with some personal issues that require my full attention. I promise it won't affect my return for the fall semester. Dr. Fairchild leaned forward, his kind face creased with worry. Is everything all right at home, if you need someone to talk to? Thank you, Avery cut in, not trusting herself to maintain composure if he pressed further. I appreciate your concern, but I have support. She didn't. Not yet, but she would. Dr. Fairchild signed the leave papers with obvious reluctance. Take care of yourself, Avery. The sophomore American literature class won't be the same without you. Avery managed a smile. I'll be back before they finish the row. Her next stop was a bank she'd never used before, where she rented a small safe deposit box. Inside, she placed one copy of her evidence, the receipt carefully tucked into a hidden compartment of her wallet. That evening, when Thaddeus asked about her day, she mentioned a challenging student conference and a department meeting, normal events that wouldn't raise suspicion. She helped Orion with his homework, read him a story, and tucked him in with an extra tight hug. I love you more than anything in the world, she whispered to him. Never forget that. Orion smiled sleepily. I love you too, Mommy. Later, as she prepared for bed, Thaddeus appeared in the bathroom doorway, watching her remove her makeup. My mother asked if we'd bring Orion over this weekend, he said casually. She wants to take him to that new science museum. Avery met his eyes in the mirror. This weekend is his friend Zach's birthday party. He's been looking forward to it for weeks. Thaddeus frowned. Mother's already bought the tickets. Without checking with us first, she was trying to do something nice, Thaddeus said, his tone hardening slightly. You know how much she loves spending time with him. Yes, turning him against me one visit at a time. Avery swallowed the bitter thought. The birthday party is important to him, she said firmly. Perhaps your mother could take him to the museum next weekend instead. Thaddeus's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Fine, I'll tell her. As he left, Avery released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A small victory, but significant. She was beginning to reclaim her authority. One decision at a time. That night, but she lay awake long after Thaddeus fell asleep, planning her next moves. She needed legal help, someone not connected to Thaddeus's firm or their social circle. She needed to document every interaction, every manipulation, and most importantly, she needed to protect Orion from becoming a pawn in their twisted game. Tomorrow, she would find a lawyer. Tomorrow, she would begin her counterattack. The law office of Sterling and Associates occupied the third floor of a modest building downtown, far from the gleaming high-rise where Thaddeus worked. The reception area featured simple, functional furniture and framed diplomas rather than expensive art. Avery had chosen Valora Sterling based on her specialization in surveillance cases and domestic abuse, and because she had no connections to the Blackwood family or their extensive social network. At precisely 10 o'clock, Valora Sterling emerged from her office to greet Avery. At 42, she had the confident bearing of someone who had fought difficult battles and won. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her suit well-tailored but not ostentatious. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said, extending her hand. "Please come in." Valora's office was organized chaos, stacks of files on every surface, legal texts open on a side table, a whiteboard covered with case notes. She cleared a chair for Avery and sat behind her desk. "Before we begin," Valora said, "I should tell you that I've had cases against your husband's firm before. If that represents a conflict of interest for you, I understand." Avery shook her head. "Actually, that's reassuring. You won't be intimidated by the Blackwood name." Valora's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Very little intimidates me these days. Now tell me what's happening." For the next hour, Avery laid out everything: the surveillance, the edited videos, the manipulation of Orion, the text message warning. As she spoke, Valora took detailed notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but otherwise allowing Avery to tell her story uninterrupted. When Avery finished, Valora set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Blackwood." "Avery, please." "Avery, what you're describing is serious criminal. In fact, illegal surveillance, intentional infliction of emotional distress, potential parental alienation." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "The challenge will be proving it without admitting to accessing your husband's computer without permission." "I thought about that," Avery said. "The warning text came from someone who knows what's happening. If we could identify that person—" "That's one approach," Valora agreed. "Another is to file for an emergency forensic examination of all electronic devices in your home, based on your reasonable suspicion of illegal surveillance. A judge can order that without requiring you to admit how you know." "Would a judge grant that?" "It depends on the judge," Valora said honestly. "The Blackwood family has influence in this town. Some judges golf with your father-in-law." Avery's heart sank. "So there's nothing we can do." "I didn't say that," Valora corrected her. "I said it would be challenging. Challenging isn't the same as impossible." She stood and moved to her whiteboard, erasing a section to make room for new notes. "Here's what we need to do. First, we document everything, every interaction, every suspicious incident, every change in your son's behavior. Second, we gather evidence, legally recordings of conversations you're part of, photographs of any devices you discover, witness statements if possible." She wrote these points on the board in crisp, clear handwriting. "Third, we file for temporary emergency custody of your son, along with exclusive use of the marital home, pending investigation. Fourth, we request a forensic examination of all electronic devices and a professional psychological evaluation of your son to determine if parental alienation is occurring." Avery nodded, committing each step to memory. "How long will all this take?" she asked. Valora turned back to her, expression serious. "Legal proceedings like this can take months, even years. The courts move slowly, especially when dealing with complex family matters." "Months," Avery repeated, dismayed. "Orion can't wait that long. The damage they're doing to him." "I understand," Valora said, her voice gentling. "That's why we'll request emergency orders first. Those can be granted much more quickly, sometimes within days, but you need to be prepared for a long battle. Avery, the Blackwoods won't give up easily." "Neither will I," Avery said, a steel edge to her voice that surprised even her. Valora smiled. "Good, because you're going to need that determination." She returned to her desk and opened a drawer, removing several forms. "These are intake documents and a retainer agreement. Take them home, read them carefully, and call me with any questions. Once you're ready to proceed, we'll need a retainer deposit." She named a figure that made Avery wince internally. It would consume most of her personal savings money she'd set aside from her teaching salary over years. Unknown to Thaddeus. I understand it's substantial, Valora said, reading Avery's expression. But going up against a family like the Blackwoods requires resources. I can manage it, Avery said, taking the forms. What should I do in the meantime? Be careful, Valora advised. Continue your normal routine as much as possible. Don't confront your husband or mother-in-law. That will only alert them that you know. Spend as much time with your son as you can, reinforcing your relationship with him. And document, document, document. As Avery stood to leave, Valora added, one more thing. You mentioned your husband's law firm. Rhodes Mercer is a senior partner there, correct? Avery nodded. Yes, he's Thaddeus's mentor. Why, Mercer has a reputation, Valora said carefully. Let's just say I've encountered his tactics before. If he's involved in this, even peripherally, we need to be exceptionally careful. You think he might be helping Thaddeus? I think powerful men protect each other, Valora replied. And Rhodes Mercer didn't become one of the most successful attorneys in the state by playing fair. The warning added another layer of dread to Avery's already overwhelming situation. She wasn't just fighting her husband and mother-in-law, she was potentially up against an entire system designed to protect people like the Blackwoods. As she left the office, forms tucked securely in her bag, Avery thought of Orion's innocent face, of Marcella poisoning his mind, of Thaddeus's cold complicity. The anger that flared within her was no longer just hurt or betrayal. It was righteous indignation, the fierce protective instinct of a mother. They had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. Avery woke to the sound of Orion's scream. She bolted upright, disoriented in the gray morning light, then raced down the hallway to her son's room. The door was open, the bed empty. Heart pounding, she followed the sound of voices to the front of the house. Mommy? Orion stood on the front porch in his dinosaur pajamas, tears streaming down his face. Thaddeus stood beside him, his expression grim. Someone vandalized your car. Avery pushed past them onto the porch. Her silver Volvo sat in the driveway, the morning sun illuminating what had been done to it. White paint covered both sides, spelling out words that made her stomach clench. Crazy. Monster. Bad mom. Oh my God, she whispered, instinctively pulling Orion to her, shielding his eyes. Who would do this? Thaddeus shook his head, his face a careful mask of concern. I've called the police. They're on their way. Orion clung to Avery, his small body trembling. Why would someone write mean things about you, Mommy? Avery knelt down, meeting his frightened eyes. Sometimes people do mean things because they're sad or angry. It doesn't mean those things are true. But why are they sad? I don't know, sweetheart, she said gently. But this isn't about you. And it isn't really about me either. It's about someone who needs help. She guided him back inside, away from the hateful words. Let's get you some breakfast while Daddy talks to the police. Okay. In the kitchen, Avery moved on autopilot, pouring cereal, slicing fruit, her mind racing. This wasn't random vandalism. This was targeted, designed to humiliate her, to reinforce the narrative they were building that she was unstable, unfit, and they'd made sure Orion saw it. Through the window, she watched Thaddeus speaking with two police officers, gesturing toward the car. He played the role of concerned husband perfectly, shoulders slumped with worry, brow furrowed, hands spread in helpless confusion. Mommy, Orion's voice pulled her back. Are you okay? Avery forced a smile. Yes, sweetie, just thinking. You're not crazy, he said firmly, spooning cereal into his mouth. Or a monster. Tears pricked at Avery's eyes. Thank you, honey. That means a lot to me. After breakfast, she sent Orion upstairs to dress while she joined Thaddeus and the officers outside. Mrs. Blackwood, the older officer greeted her. I'm Officer Daniels. We were just telling your husband that without witnesses or surveillance footage, it'll be difficult to identify who did this. We don't have any outdoor cameras, Avery asked, looking at Thaddeus. A flicker of something annoyance concern crossed his face. No, we've never needed them before. Would you say you have any enemies, Mrs. Blackwood? The younger officer asked, pen poised over his notepad. Anyone who might want to target you specifically? No, she said. I'm a high school literature teacher. My life is pretty ordinary. Officer Daniels nodded sympathetically. These things are often random. People looking to cause trouble. We'll file a report, and you should contact your insurance company. After the police left, Thaddeus placed an awkward hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry this happened. Do you want me to stay home today? No, it's fine, Avery said. I'll handle the insurance and get the car cleaned up. If you're sure. He seemed relieved. I have an important meeting with Rhodes this morning. Of course he did. Rhodes Mercer, the senior partner at his firm, who always seemed to need Thaddeus at critical moments in their personal lives. Go ahead, she said. I've got this. Once Thaddeus had left, taking Orion to school in his BMW, Avery immediately called Valora Sterling. They've escalated, she said without preamble when the attorney answered. Someone vandalized my car with words like crazy and monster. Made sure my son saw it. Are you somewhere you can talk freely? Valora asked. Yes, I'm alone in the house. Good. First, take photos of everything for evidence. Second, did the police file a report? Yes, but they didn't seem hopeful about finding who did it. I'm not surprised, Valora said. Now listen carefully. Today, I want you to purchase a small outdoor security camera, something discreet that you can install yourself. Point it at your driveway. You think they'll try again? People who escalate once often continue escalating, Valora said grimly. They're trying to provoke a reaction from you. Don't give it to them. Act shaken but resilient. After hanging up, Avery followed Valora's advice, driving a rental car to an electronics store in the next town. She purchased a small, wireless security camera and installed it that afternoon, hiding it in the climbing roses beside the garage, angled perfectly to capture the driveway in her car. That evening, Thaddeus watched her carefully as she prepared dinner, his eyes tracking her movements as if searching for cracks in her composure. How are you holding up? He asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. I'm okay, she said, chopping vegetables with steady hands. The insurance company is sending someone tomorrow to assess the damage. Good. He sipped his scotch. Mother called. She's very concerned about you. Avery nearly laughed at the absurdity. That's thoughtful of her. She suggested you might want to see someone. Professionally, I mean. And there it was, the next move in their game. Plant the idea that she needed psychological help, that something was wrong with her. I appreciate her concern, Avery said mildly, but I'm managing just fine. Thaddeus frowned slightly, perhaps disappointed by her calm response. Well, if you change your mind, she knows an excellent therapist. Very discreet. No doubt someone in their pocket primed to diagnose her with whatever condition would best serve their narrative. I'll keep that in mind, she said, turning back to her cooking. 3 days later, Avery's vigilance paid off. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed with an alert from the security camera. She slipped out of bed and into the guest room, where she could safely check the footage. The night vision video clearly showed a figure in a dark coat approaching her newly cleaned car. The person, a woman in a hooded coat, uncapped a can of spray paint and began writing on the driver's side door. Even with the hood obscuring most of her face, Avery recognized the distinctive posture, the characteristic tilt of the head. Marcella Blackwood. She watched, heart pounding, as her mother-in-law finished her vandalism and hurried back to a car parked down the street. The timestamp showed the entire incident lasted less than 3 minutes. Avery downloaded the footage immediately and sent it to Valora's secure email address with a brief message, "We have her." The next morning, she acted surprised and distressed when Thaddeus discovered the new vandalism, "Liar," sprayed across her car door. "This is getting out of hand," he said, running a hand through his hair in apparent frustration. "I'm calling the police again." I installed a security camera after the last incident, Avery said, watching his face carefully. It caught everything. Thaddeus froze momentarily, then recovered. That is good thinking. The police will need that footage. Of course, she said, I'll make sure they get it. The police arrived within the hour. Officer Daniels returned, this time with a female officer named Rodriguez. Avery played the footage for them on her tablet, watching their expressions change as Marcella came clearly into view. Do you recognize this woman? Officer Rodriguez asked. Yes, Avery said quietly. It's my mother-in-law, Marcella Blackwood. Thaddeus, standing behind the officers, went pale. That can't be right, and he protested. There must be some mistake. The footage is quite clear, Mr. Blackwood, Officer Daniels said, his tone considerably cooler than during their previous interaction. We'll need to speak with your mother. This is absurd, Thaddeus insisted. My mother wouldn't do something like this. Officer Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. The camera suggests otherwise, sir. After the police left, Thaddeus rounded on Avery, his mask of concern completely gone. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, voice low and dangerous. Protecting myself, she replied evenly. Someone was vandalizing my property. I had every right to install a security camera. You've humiliated my mother. Do you have any idea what this could do to her reputation, to mine? I didn't vandalize my own car. Thaddeus, twice. His face contorted with rage. You're tearing this family apart with your paranoia. Am I? Avery met his gaze steadily. Or is that what you and your mother have been trying to convince everyone of? For a moment, she thought he might strike her. Instead, he grabbed his keys and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. That afternoon, Valora called with news. The police have questioned Marcella Blackwood. She denied everything at first, but when confronted with the video evidence, she claimed she was trying to protect her family from your increasing instability. Of course she did, Avery said bitterly. Here's the good news. I filed for an emergency protective order based on the vandalism and the psychological harassment. The judge granted it an hour ago. Marcella Blackwood is legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, your home, or Orion's school. A small victory, but significant. For the first time since receiving that mysterious text message, Avery felt a spark of hope. What happens next, she asked. Now we press our advantage. Valora said, the video doesn't just prove the vandalism, it establishes a pattern of harassment that supports our claims about the surveillance. We've cracked their facade. Avery, let's see what else crumbles. Thaddeus didn't come home that night, or the next. On the third day, he returned at dawn, unshaven and smelling of whiskey, to pack a suitcase. Where are you staying? Avery asked, watching from the bedroom doorway as he stuffed clothes haphazardly into a leather weekender. My parents, he said curtly, since my mother can't come here anymore. She vandalized my car, Thaddeus, twice, with horrible things our son saw. He whirled on her. You don't understand what you've started. The restraining order, involving the police. Do you have any idea how this looks? How it looks, Avery repeated incredulously. What about how it is? Your mother wrote horrible things about me where our child could see them. She's been telling Orion I'm going to leave him. She's concerned about your mental state, Thaddeus said, his voice dropping to a hiss. We all are. You've been acting paranoid, installing secret cameras, making wild accusations. They're not wild when I have proof. Avery cut in. And speaking of proof, should we discuss the surveillance cameras you and your mother installed throughout our house? The edited videos on your computer. Thaddeus went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Avery said quietly. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. They stared at each other, the truth hanging between them, neither willing to retreat. Finally, Thaddeus zipped his bag with a savage tug. This isn't over. No, Avery agreed. It's not. After he left, she sank onto the bed, adrenaline draining away. The confrontation had confirmed what she already knew. Thaddeus was fully complicit in the surveillance and manipulation. There would be no appealing to his better nature. No possibility of him choosing her and Orion over his mother's schemes. She was truly alone in this fight. That evening, when Avery picked Orion up from his after-school program, He was unusually quiet. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" she asked as they drove home. He looked out the window, not meeting her eyes. "Daddy says Grandma can't visit anymore because of you." Avery's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Did Daddy explain why Grandma can't visit?" Orion shook his head. "Grandma did something very wrong," Avery said carefully. "She wrote mean things on my car." "Do you remember seeing those words?" Orion nodded. "The police said Grandma needs to stay away for a while because of that. It's not because I don't want her to visit you. Daddy says you're trying to keep me away from everyone." Avery's heart sank. They were still poisoning him against her, using Thaddeus as the conduit now that Marcella couldn't approach directly. "That's not true, honey," she said gently. "I would never keep you from people who love you properly. But sometimes adults have complicated problems with each other that have nothing to do with you." Later that night, after Orion was asleep, Avery found him crying in the bathroom. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He managed, "Daddy said you might be taken away if you don't get better soon." Avery pulled him into her arms, rocking him gently as rage burned through her veins. "Listen to me. Orion, I am not going anywhere. I am your mother, and I will always be here for you. Always. Promise," he hiccuped against her shoulder. "I promise," she said fiercely. "With all my heart." Once Orion was finally asleep again, Avery called Valora. "They're using Thaddeus to continue manipulating Orion," she said, voice shaking with anger. "He told our son I might be taken away if I don't get better. They're terrorizing a 7-year-old child." "Document everything," Valora instructed. "Each conversation, each upsetting comment. We'll add it to our petition for a psychiatric evaluation of Orion. This is textbook parental alienation." "The custody hearing isn't for another 3 weeks," Avery said. "They can do a lot of damage in that time. I might be able to expedite things, given these new developments," Valora said thoughtfully. "Leave it with me." 2 days later, Valora called with news. "The judge has ordered a full temporary custody evaluation based on the evidence of parental alienation. Thaddeus will have supervised visitation only until the evaluation is complete." Avery closed her eyes in relief. "When the order goes into effect tomorrow, Thaddeus will be served at his office this afternoon. He'll be furious." "Probably," Valora agreed. "But the order includes a provision that he's not to discuss the case with Orion or make disparaging remarks about you. If he violates that, he could lose visitation entirely." When Thaddeus appeared at the house that evening, his fury was barely contained. He thrust a sheaf of legal papers at Avery. "Supervised visitation," he snarled. "You're trying to keep my son from me now." "No," Avery said calmly. "I'm trying to protect him from being used as a weapon in an adult conflict. You told him I might be taken away." "You're terrifying him, Thaddeus." "I was telling him the truth," Thaddeus retorted. "If you continue with these delusions, with these legal attacks on my family, you will lose everything." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality," he said coldly. "You have no idea who you're up against." "Neither do you," Avery replied, closing the door in his face. Despite the temporary victory, Avery knew the real battle was just beginning. The Blackwoods would not surrender their control easily, and they had resources she could only imagine. Her next move needed to be decisive, something that would expose the truth to everyone. That's when she decided on the birthday dinner plan. She would invite the entire Blackwood family, ostensibly for reconciliation, and then reveal exactly what they had been doing. It was risky, potentially explosive, but sometimes, Avery reflected, the only way to deal with darkness was to shine a light directly into it. A week after the custody order, Avery received a text from an unexpected source. "Can we meet alone? It's important." Ren, Thaddeus' younger sister, had always been the family outlier, quieter, less polished, seemingly uncomfortable with the Blackwood wealth and status. During family gatherings, she often sat on the periphery, observing rather than participating. Avery hesitated, suspecting a trap, but something in the simplicity of the message, its directness, made her curious. She replied, "Coffee shop on Elm Street." 2 p.m. tomorrow. The response came quickly. I'll be there. Come alone, please. The next day, Avery arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of both entrances. She ordered a black coffee and waited, scanning each person who entered. At exactly 2 o'clock, Wren Blackwood pushed through the door, looking even more nervous than usual. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes jeans and an oversized sweater, a stark contrast to the polished appearance Marcella demanded of her family. She spotted Avery and approached hesitantly, sliding into the chair across from her. Thank you for meeting me, she said, voice barely above a whisper. You said it was important, Avery replied neutrally. Wren glanced around, then leaned forward. I can't do this anymore. The lies, the manipulation, it's wrong. It's always been wrong. Avery kept her expression carefully blank. What exactly are you referring to? Wren reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the table. They've been planning this for months, she said, pushing the envelope toward Avery. The cameras, the videos, all of it. I didn't understand how far they would go until recently. Avery didn't touch the envelope. Why are you telling me this now? Because of Orion, Wren said, her eyes filling with tears. Using a child like that, it's cruel. And because, she hesitated. Because I was like Orion once, the pawn in my mother's games. I know what it does to you. Avery studied the younger woman, looking for signs of deception. She found only distress and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Slowly, she opened the envelope. Inside was a printed email with the subject line, Plan if Avery snaps. The sender was Marcella Blackwood. The email detailed an elaborate scheme instructions for installing hidden cameras, suggested phrases to provoke emotional reactions. You're not okay. Forgetting things again. Do you need help? And a timeline for gathering enough evidence to petition for psychological evaluation. Attached to the email was a separate document titled Custody Strategy, outlining how to use the manufactured evidence to secure full custody of Orion for Thaddeus. With Marcella as the primary caregiver during his demanding work hours, Avery felt simultaneously sick and vindicated as she read. The cold calculation of it all, the detailed planning, it was worse than she'd imagined. There's more, Wren said quietly, sliding a small USB drive across the table. Everything I could download from my mother's computer. Email exchanges with Thaddeus, with Rhodes Mercer, even with a psychiatrist who agreed to testify about your condition without ever meeting you. Avery stared at the thumb drive, the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. Why didn't you come forward before? Wren looked down at her untouched coffee. I was afraid. My mother, she controls everything. My allowance, my apartment, my job at the family foundation. I'd have nothing without her approval. And now I can't live with myself. Wren said simply, what they're doing to you, to Orion, it's evil. Use the evidence however you need to. Just keep me out of it, if you can. I don't want my name involved. Avery slipped both the envelope and the USB drive into her bag. Thank you. Wren, this could change everything. Wren stood, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Be careful. Avery, my mother is dangerous when cornered. And Thaddeus. She hesitated. Thaddeus has always needed her approval more than anything else. Even his own family's happiness. After Wren left, Avery remained at the table, processing what had just happened. The evidence Wren provided wasn't just confirmation of what she already knew. It was direct proof of intent, of malice, of a calculated campaign to destroy her. She texted Valora need to meet ASAP. New evidence, game-changing. That evening, Valora reviewed everything in her office, her expression growing grimmer with each document. This is, she began, then shook her head. I've seen some underhanded tactics in my career, but this level of premeditation, this detailed planning, it's extraordinary. Can we use it? Avery asked. Absolutely, Valora said firmly. This isn't just evidence of harassment anymore. This is conspiracy, fraud, potential criminal charges. The judge will have no choice but to take immediate action. She drafted a new motion based on the evidence, requesting an emergency hearing. We'll submit this first thing tomorrow. With evidence this compelling, we should get a hearing within days. And Ren, Avery asked, she's afraid of retaliation. We can protect her identity initially, Valora said. But if this goes to trial, she may eventually need to testify. The judge reviewed the new evidence and granted the emergency hearing in less than 72 hours. The outcome was decisive. Thaddeus and Marcella were both legally prohibited from approaching Avery or Orion without supervision. The court ordered a full forensic examination of all electronic devices in the Blackwood home and offices. A court-appointed psychologist would evaluate Orion to assess the damage done by the parental alienation campaign. Despite this legal victory, Avery decided to proceed with her birthday dinner plan. She needed more than a court order. She needed the Blackwoods to face the truth of what they had done, not just legally but morally. She sent invitations to the entire family, including Griffin and Wren, framing it as an attempt at reconciliation for Orion's sake. To her surprise, everyone accepted. Even Marcella, despite the restraining order, replied that she would request a temporary exception in the spirit of family healing. Avery recognized the response for what it was: another move in their game. They believed they still held the upper hand, that she was naively seeking peace. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days before the dinner, Avery received an anonymous text: "Don't trust anyone tomorrow, not even those who smile." She stared at the message, wondering if it was from Wren or someone else. Was it a warning about a new Blackwood scheme? Or a threat? Either way, she was prepared. The projector was rented, the videos organized, the evidence compiled. If the Blackwoods wanted family drama, they were about to experience it in full, devastating clarity. They had taught her how to play their game. Now she would show them how to end it. With Wren's evidence in hand, Avery and Valora began building a more comprehensive case. The custody hearing was still weeks away, but the emergency orders had bought them valuable time to strengthen their position. "We need to look deeper into Rhodes Mercer's involvement," Valora said during one of their strategy sessions. "The emails suggest he's more than just Thaddeus's boss. He's actively participating in this scheme." "Why would he care about my marriage or custody of Orion?" Avery wondered. Valora tapped her pen against her legal pad. "That's what we need to find out. There's something here we're missing, some motivation beyond just helping a colleague." They hired a private investigator to look into Rhodes Mercer's connections to the Blackwood family. The investigator, a former detective named Morrow, reported back within days. "Mercer and Griffin Blackwood were fraternity brothers," he explained, spreading photographs across Valora's desk. "But it goes deeper than that. Mercer manages the Blackwood Family Trust, a significant portion of their wealth. He has power of attorney for Griffin's financial affairs and sits on the board of their family foundation. So he has a financial interest in maintaining his relationship with them," Avery said. "More than that," Morrow continued, "Mercer's own financial situation is closely tied to the Blackwoods. He's made several high-risk investments using loans secured against Blackwood assets. If he lost their favor, he'd lose everything," Valora finished. "So when Marcella decided you were a threat to the family, Mercer had personal reasons to help remove that threat." Avery shook her head, still struggling to understand. "But why am I a threat? I've never tried to access their money or interfere with their business." "Sometimes it's not about what you've done," Valora said gently. "It's about what you represent. You're an outsider. You weren't chosen from their social circle. You have influence over Orion, who will eventually inherit significant wealth. From their perspective, you're an interloper who could divert the Blackwood legacy." The explanation made a cruel kind of sense. It wasn't personal, or rather, it was personal in the most impersonal way possible. She was a variable they couldn't control, so she had to be eliminated. The investigation also revealed something unexpected: a previous custody case involving Thaddeus. 5 years before he met Avery, he was briefly engaged to a woman named Lyra Whitman. Morrow explained. They had a contentious breakup, followed by a custody dispute over her daughter from a previous relationship. Thaddeus claimed he'd acted as the child's father for 2 years and sought visitation rights. What happened? Avery asked. The case was suddenly dropped. Whitman withdrew all claims and moved to another state. There's very little public record beyond that. Valora frowned. That's unusual. Can we contact this woman? I've located her in Oregon. Morrow said she was reluctant to speak about it, but agreed to a call with you. Ms. Sterling. She said, and I quote, "If he's doing it again, I want to help." The call with Lyra Whitman proved illuminating. She described tactics eerily similar to what Avery was experiencing: surveillance, edited recordings, accusations of mental instability. They tried to make me look unfit, Lyra explained, her voice still bitter years later. Thaddeus suddenly had evidence that I was unstable, neglectful. Then Rhodes Mercer approached me with a deal: drop everything, sign away any claims involving Thaddeus, and move away with a settlement. Otherwise, they'd use the evidence to take my daughter completely. Why didn't you fight it? Valora asked. Because they had resources I couldn't match, Lyra said simply, and because I couldn't risk losing my daughter. The settlement let us start over somewhere safe. After the call, Avery sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just about me, she finally said. This is what they do. It's a pattern. Yes, Valora agreed grimly. And patterns are admissible evidence. Lyra has agreed to provide a sworn affidavit about her experience. With that and Wren's evidence, we can demonstrate that this is a calculated strategy they have employed before. As they built their case, Avery continued planning the birthday dinner. She secured a small event space, arranged for catering, and hired a technician to operate the projector and sound system. Every detail was carefully considered, from the seating arrangement to the precise sequence of evidence that would be presented. 3 days before the dinner, Thaddeus made an unexpected appearance at the house during his supervised visitation with Orion. "This has gone far enough," he said when Orion was out of earshot. "You've made your point. Let's discuss a settlement before things get worse." "Worse for whom?" Avery asked. "For all of us," Thaddeus said, an edge of desperation in his voice. "This public battle isn't good for anyone, especially Orion." "I agree," Avery said calmly. "That's why I'm hosting the birthday dinner. A chance for everyone to talk privately, as a family." Relief flashed across Thaddeus's face. "So you're willing to be reasonable?" "I've always been reasonable. Thaddeus, it's time for everyone else to be as well." He nodded, seemingly satisfied that she was backing down. "Mother will be pleased. She's been concerned about the direction this has taken." "I'm sure she has," Avery said, hiding her contempt behind a neutral expression. "Please tell her I look forward to seeing everyone on Saturday." After Thaddeus left with Orion for their supervised outing, Avery called Valora. "He thinks I'm surrendering," she said. "They all do. They'll come to the dinner expecting me to apologize, to beg for reconciliation." "Good," Valora said. "The element of surprise works in our favor. Just be careful, Avery. When people like the Blackwoods realize they've been outmaneuvered, they can become dangerous." "I'm counting on it," Avery replied, "because this time, everyone will see exactly who they really are." The stage was set. The evidence was prepared. Now all that remained was to bring the Blackwoods face to face with the truth they had worked so hard to bury. The private dining room of the Ivory Room glowed with soft amber light. White lilies, Avery's favorite flowers, though the Blackwoods wouldn't know, that adorned each table in elegant crystal vases. A projector screen had been set up at one end of the room, ostensibly for a birthday slideshow. Avery arrived early to oversee the final arrangements. The technical assistant, a taciturn man named Julian who came highly recommended by Valora, ran through the sequence one last time. "Everything's queued up," he confirmed. "When you give the signal, I'll start with the innocuous clips, then transition to the evidence. The side-by-side comparisons of the manipulated videos are particularly effective." Avery nodded, smoothing her midnight blue dress, a deliberate, formal enough for the occasion but severe. Nothing that could be interpreted as conciliatory. "And you understand the importance of timing?" she asked. "Absolutely. Julian assured her. No one will be able to shut it down once it starts. Orion was spending the weekend with Dr. Fairchild and his family, an arrangement Avery had made to protect him from witnessing the confrontation. The court had approved this temporary custody transfer, another small victory in a battle that had consumed her life. At 7 o'clock precisely, the Blackwoods began to arrive. Griffin and Marcella first, entering with the practiced poise of people accustomed to making entrances. Marcella wore an elegant cream pantsuit, her silver hair swept into an immaculate updo. Despite the restraining order, she approached Avery with arms outstretched. "Darling," she said, her voice honeyed with false warmth. "How brave of you to arrange this gathering. I knew you'd come to your senses eventually." Avery accepted the air kisses without returning them. "Thank you for coming, Marcella." Griffin. Griffin nodded awkwardly, unable to meet her eyes. He seemed diminished somehow, as if the events of recent weeks had deflated him. Wren arrived next, visibly nervous, giving Avery a quick, meaningful glance as she accepted a glass of wine from a passing server. She chose a seat at the far edge of the table, distancing herself from what was to come. Thaddeus was last, striding in with the confidence of a man who believed victory was at hand. He traded his usual conservative suits for a more casual blazer and open-collared shirt in an attempt to appear relaxed, approachable. "Avery," he said, bending to kiss her cheek, "you look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, betraying nothing of the ice in her veins. "Shall we begin?" They took their seats around the elegantly set table. Marcella immediately took control of the conversation, as she always did. "I must say, this is a pleasant surprise. Avery, after all the unpleasantness of recent weeks, I wasn't sure you'd be open to reconciliation." "Family is important," Avery said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue, "especially for Orion's sake." "Precisely," Marcella nodded approvingly. "Children need stability, consistency. They need to know the adults in their lives can resolve their differences." The irony was almost laughable. The first course arrived a delicate butternut squash soup that Avery barely tasted. She allowed the conversation to flow around her, Marcella and Thaddeus exchanging meaningful glances as they discussed trivial matters, the weather, an upcoming charity gala, a distant cousin's wedding. They thought they had won. They thought she had broken. When the main course was cleared away, Avery stood, champagne flute in hand. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began, her voice steady. "Family gatherings are important occasions for honesty and clarity." Thaddeus smiled indulgently, raising his glass. "To honesty," he echoed, a hint of mockery in his tone. "Yes," Avery agreed, meeting his gaze. "To honesty, which is why I've prepared something special for tonight." She nodded toward Julian, who dimmed the lights. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright rectangle onto the screen. "What's this?" Marcella asked, still smiling though wariness had crept into her eyes. "Just a little presentation," Avery said, "about our family." The screen flickered, showing a gentle scene Avery reading a bedtime story to Orion, his small body curled trustingly against hers. "How sweet," Marcella commented, relaxing slightly. Then the image froze, and an audio recording began to play. Marcella's voice, crisp and clear. "She'll destroy herself. We just need to give her a little push." The room fell silent. Marcella's smile vanished. "What is this?" Thaddeus demanded, half rising from his chair. "Please," Avery said calmly. "It's just getting interesting." The screen split into two sections. On the left, the original footage of Avery quietly crying while reading a letter. On the right, the manipulated version showing her apparently having a breakdown, screaming and throwing objects. "As you can see," Avery narrated, "the differences are quite striking. Professional editing, certainly, but detectable when compared side by side." More examples followed, Avery calmly disagreeing with Thaddeus in the kitchen, transformed into a raging confrontation. Avery taking medication for a migraine. Recut to suggest substance abuse. Avery speaking firmly to Orion about homework. Edited to appear threatening. You set all this up, Marcella accused, her voice shaking with rage. And then, the moment Avery hadn't anticipated, Griffin Blackwood slammed his hand on the table. You set it up, Agnes, he said, using Marcella's given name, something Avery had never heard before. Not her. All eyes turned to him in shock. Griffin, Marcella hissed. Be quiet. No, don't, he said, an unexpected steel in his voice. I bought the first camera. I thought it was for security, but I never knew you were manipulating the child. You've gone too far. Marcella's face drained of color. She looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route, finding none. Thaddeus lunged for the projector booth, but Julian was prepared, locking the door from inside. Oh, man. There's one more segment, Julian called out, as instructed. The final clip began Thaddeus speaking to his lawyer on speakerphone in his office, unaware of the recording device Avery had placed there after discovering their surveillance. I'll push her until she loses custody, Thaddeus's voice declared. Then we'll get the house and the kid. Mother can help with him while I'm working. A woman Avery didn't recognize, presumably one of Thaddeus's cousins, abruptly stood and walked out, unable to witness more. Griffin Blackwood sat with his head in his hands. When the lights came up, the silence was deafening. No one could meet Avery's eyes except Thaddeus, who stared at her with naked hatred. You ruined everything, he said quietly. I just took off your masks, Avery replied. The rest you did yourselves. She gathered her purse and shawl, nodding to Julian, who began packing up his equipment. The court already has copies of everything you have seen tonight, plus considerably more evidence. She informed them, I'll see you all at the hearing next week. Good night. As she reached the door, her phone buzzed with a notification. A new court order had been issued electronically, full temporary custody of Orion granted to Avery, with a complete no-contact order for both Thaddeus and Marcella pending the final hearing. Outside in the cool night air, Avery took her first deep, unrestricted breath in months. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Avery's victory at the birthday dinner sent shockwaves through the Blackwood family. Griffin moved out of the family mansion and into a hotel. Wren stopped attending family functions entirely. Thaddeus was placed on administrative leave by his law firm, pending investigation of his ethics violations. But Marcella remained dangerous cornered, but not defeated. A week after the dinner, Avery returned home from grocery shopping to find a white envelope sitting on her kitchen table. No name, no return address, no indication of how it had gotten there. Inside was a property sale contract. The house, her house. The home she shared with Orion had been sold 3 days earlier to someone named Phoebe Vex. Thaddeus's signature on the seller's line was unmistakable. Avery stared at the document, momentarily unable to process what she was seeing. How could Thaddeus sell their house? The property was in both their names. He couldn't legally transfer it without her signature. Unless... She flipped to the last page and found her own signature perfectly forged at the bottom. With trembling hands, she called Valora. They forged my signature on a property sale, she said without preamble. The house has apparently been sold to someone named Phoebe Vex. That's impossible, Valora said. The house is under temporary injunction as part of the divorce proceedings. No sale could be processed. Well, someone thinks it has been, Avery replied, and I have the contract to prove it. Don't touch anything else, Valora instructed. I'm sending someone to pick up the envelope for forensic analysis. In the meantime, I'll file an emergency motion to void any attempted property transfer. Avery spent a sleepless night wondering how the envelope had appeared in her locked house. The security system showed no breaches, no unexpected entries. Yet someone had been inside while she was out, someone with a key, or someone skilled enough to bypass her locks and alarm. The next day, a forensic document examiner confirmed that the signature was indeed forged, professionally done, but detectably not Avery's. More disturbing was the discovery that Phoebe Vex didn't appear to exist. The address listed on the purchase agreement belonged to a vacant lot outside the city limits. The phone number went to a disconnected line. The buyer's attorney was listed as a P.O. box. It's a shell, boss, Valora explained. Someone created this Phoebe Vex identity for the transaction. The question is, who, Avery thought of the mysterious envelope appearing in her locked house. Someone who wants me to know they can still reach me. That all my precautions, all my legal victories, don't matter. The judge has invalidated the sale, Valora assured her. The house remains yours, but I'm concerned about the security breach. Perhaps you should stay somewhere else for a few days. Avery shook her head. No, I won't be driven from my home. I'll change the locks, upgrade the security system, but I won't run. That night, as Orion slept peacefully in his room, recovered somewhat from the emotional manipulation now that he was free from Thaddeus and Marcella's influence, Avery began her own investigation into Phoebe Vex. The name bothered her. It seemed familiar somehow, though she couldn't place it. She started with basic internet searches, finding nothing. Then she tried variations of the name, alternative spellings. Still nothing. On a hunch, she began searching through old photos on social media, her own accounts. Thaddeus's, mutual friends from college. Hours passed as she scrolled through digital archives, looking for any mention of the name. At 3 in the morning, bleary-eyed but determined, she found something, a deactivated Instagram account with the handle PhoebeXVex. The profile picture was black and white, low resolution, showing a young woman with long dark hair. Avery enlarged the image, studying the grainy features. There was something hauntingly familiar about the face, though she couldn't quite place it. She saved the photo and continued searching. 2 days later, while helping Orion clean out his closet, she found an old photo album. Thaddeus had once shown them pictures from his college years. She flipped through it idly until a particular photo made her stop cold. There, in a group shot taken in what appeared to be the basement of Marcella's house, was the woman from the Instagram profile. She sat on Thaddeus's lap, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist, both of them laughing at some forgotten joke. The caption, written in Marcella's precise handwriting, Thaddeus and Larissa, Thanksgiving 2010, my first home, Larissa, not Phoebe. Avery photographed the page with her phone and sent it to Valora with a message, found our mystery buyer. Valora's investigator, Morrow, began digging into Larissa's background. The results were disturbing. Larissa Frost, he reported, changed her name legally to Phoebe Vex in 2017 following an identity fraud case in Colorado. She and Thaddeus dated throughout college and for 2 years afterward. His mother adored her. She came from the right family, attended the right schools. What happened? Avery asked. Thaddeus broke it off when he moved to New York for law school. Apparently, she didn't take it well. There was a restraining order at one point, though it was later dropped. And now she's resurfaced, Avery mused, working with Marcella and Thaddeus to intimidate me. It appears so, Morrow agreed. She's been living in Seattle for the past few years, working for a real estate investment firm. Took a leave of absence 3 months ago, right around when your troubles began. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Phoebe Vex, formerly Larissa Frost, wasn't just a convenient accomplice. She was the backup plan, the replacement Marcella had always wanted for Avery. With this new information, Valora filed a motion to void the fraudulent property sale based on the pre-existing relationship between buyer and seller and Phoebe's involvement in the harassment campaign against Avery. The court agreed, placing the house under judicial protection. Phoebe Vex vanished again, her temporary apartment in the city abandoned overnight. But instead of relief, Avery felt a growing unease. The silence that followed felt too calculated, too calm, like the eye of a hurricane, with the worst still to come. 2 weeks after exposing Phoebe Vex, Avery received a voicemail from a blocked number. The message contained only 3 seconds of audio, a child's voice saying, "It's her." Orion's voice. She played it again, heart racing. The recording had been taken recently. She recognized the distinctive way he pronounced certain sounds, a speech pattern his therapist had been helping him with over the past month. Somehow, despite all the protective orders, despite the security system and changed locks, despite everything, they still had access to her son. Avery tore through the house, checking every lamp, every picture frame, every electrical outlet for hidden cameras or microphones. She found nothing, but the feeling of violation remained, a persistent ache beneath her ribs. That night, as she prepared for bed, a faint blue light caught her eye reflected in the vanity mirror, coming from inside the lampshade on her nightstand. She approached cautiously, pulse thundering in her ears. Nestled within the metal frame of the lamp was a tiny camera, its blue indicator light barely visible through a pinhole aperture. The device was aimed directly at her bed. Avery sank to her knees, a wave of nausea washing over her. After everything, the court orders, the restraining orders, the security measures, they were still watching her, still invading her most private moments. With shaking hands, she called the police. Officers arrived within minutes, collecting the device and dusting for fingerprints. Based on the camera's model and the transmission frequency, they were able to trace the signal to a nearby location, an apartment registered to Phoebe Vex, paid for through a shell company linked to Rhodes Mercer. "We'll get a search warrant immediately," Officer Rodriguez assured her. "This is a clear violation of the restraining order and potentially criminal stalking." The search warrant was executed the following morning. Inside Phoebe's apartment, police found surveillance equipment, boots detailing Avery's daily schedule, and photographs of both Avery and Orion taken without their knowledge. The obsession was evident in every corner of the space, a shrine to hatred and control. Phoebe herself was gone, but her digital footprint remained. Her laptop, carelessly left behind, contained emails between her, Thaddeus, and Rhodes Mercer, outlining their continued campaign against Avery despite the court orders. With this new evidence, Valora filed formal charges: stalking, violation of court orders, invasion of privacy, and endangerment of a minor. The judge didn't hesitate this time. Arrest warrants were issued for Phoebe Vex, Rhodes Mercer, and Thaddeus Blackwood. Marcella escaped criminal charges due to insufficient direct evidence of her involvement in the latest surveillance. But the civil case against her continued to build. Police arrested Rhodes Mercer at his office, leading him out in handcuffs past shocked colleagues. Phoebe was apprehended at a bus station, attempting to flee the state. Thaddeus surrendered himself through his attorney, maintaining his innocence even as the evidence mounted against him. The case exploded in the media. What had begun as a private family matter became a national conversation about surveillance, psychological abuse, and the manipulation of the legal system by those with wealth and power. For the first time, Avery saw all three faces: Thaddeus, Rhodes, and Phoebe on the news, their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the harsh light of public scrutiny. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in early October. Avery arrived at the courthouse with Valora beside her, a wall of reporters and photographers crowding the steps outside. "Don't engage with them," Valora advised as they navigated through the throng. "Let the evidence speak for itself." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Marcella sat in the front row behind the defense table, immaculately dressed as always. Though her usual imperious expression had been replaced by one of calculated sympathy, the grieving mother whose family had been torn apart by misunderstanding. Thaddeus, Rhodes, and Phoebe sat at the defense table, each with their own attorney. Thaddeus wore a conservative suit, his demeanor subdued and serious. Rhodes projected confident indignation, as if the proceedings were a mere inconvenience. Phoebe stared straight ahead, her face a blank mask. As the charges were read, a litany of violations spanning months, Avery watched Thaddeus's face. He showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused his own son. His only reaction came when the prosecutor mentioned the forged property sale, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features, as if he were irritated by the failure of the scheme rather than its immorality. The evidence presentation was methodical and devastating. The prosecutors displayed the surveillance equipment, the manipulated videos, the forged documents, the emails detailing the conspiracy. They called expert witnesses who confirmed the authenticity of the recordings and the sophisticated nature of the surveillance operation. Lyra Whitman testified about her similar experience years earlier, establishing a pattern of behavior. But Ren Blackwood, finally finding her courage, testified about her mother's orchestration of the campaign against Avery, reading from emails and recounting conversations that left no doubt about Marcella's central role. Throughout it all, Avery sat quietly, her composure a stark contrast to the increasingly agitated defendants. When it was her turn to testify, she spoke clearly and factually, without embellishment or excessive emotion. She described the systematic campaign to destabilize her, to alienate her from her son, to erase her from her own life. They didn't see me as a person, she concluded. They saw me as an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. My son's well-being, my dignity, my basic rights to privacy and safety, none of that mattered to them. The defense attempted to paint her as paranoid, unstable, vindictive, exactly the narrative they had tried to create from the beginning. But their arguments fell flat against the mountain of evidence and the calm certainty of Avery's testimony. After 3 days of testimony, the judge ruled Thaddeus, Rhodes, and Phoebe would stand trial on all charges. Bail was set high for each, with strict conditions including ankle monitors and prohibition from any contact with Avery or Orion. Additionally, the judge issued a permanent restraining order against Marcella, barring her from approaching within 1,000 feet of Avery or Orion for the next 5 years. As they left the courthouse, Valora squeezed Avery's hand. This is just the beginning of the criminal case, but it's a strong start. The full trial won't be for months, but today's ruling means they can't hurt you anymore. Avery nodded, too overwhelmed for words. The journey had been longer and more painful than she could have imagined when she received that first warning text months ago. But standing in the autumn sunlight, free from the shadows of surveillance and manipulation, she felt something she had almost forgotten: peace about us. 6 months later, Avery stood in the empty living room of her new house, watching as movers carried in the last of their belongings. The modest craftsman bungalow in a small town an hour from the city bore no resemblance to the elegant colonial they had left behind, and that was precisely why she had chosen it. New house, new neighborhood, new beginning. The criminal trial had concluded 2 months earlier with guilty verdicts on most counts. Thaddeus received 3 years, with possibility of parole after 18 months. Rhodes Mercer got 5 years for his more extensive role in the conspiracy and previous similar cases that came to light during the investigation. Phoebe received a suspended sentence and mandatory psychiatric treatment after agreeing to testify against the others. Marcella had escaped criminal charges, but lost nearly everything else. Griffin had filed for divorce. The scandal had destroyed her standing in their social circle, and most painfully for her, she had lost all access to her grandson. The divorce settlement had been finalized last week. Avery received full custody of Orion, with Thaddeus granted limited supervised visitation after his release if Orion wanted it. The financial settlement was generous, reflecting not just division of assets, but damages for the harassment campaign. "Mom, come see my room," Orion called from upstairs, his voice echoing through the empty spaces that would soon become home. Avery climbed the creaking stairs to find her son arranging his books on a new shelf, his face alight with excitement. At 8, he had shown remarkable resilience, though his therapist warned there would be challenges ahead as he processed what had happened. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing proudly at his arrangement. "It looks perfect," she said, ruffling his curls. "Do you think I'll make friends at the new school?" "Absolutely," Avery assured him. "You'll have a wonderful 3rd grade year." Later, after Orion was asleep in his new room, Avery sat on the back porch swing, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of their new neighborhood. Crickets chirped in the garden. An elderly couple walked their dog past the white picket fence. A neighbor across the street watered late-blooming flowers in the gathering dusk. Ordinary moments. Safe moments. She thought of the warning text that had started everything, still unsure who had sent it. Wren denied being the sender when asked directly. Perhaps it had been Griffin, making a small stand against his wife's machinations. Or perhaps someone else entirely, someone who had witnessed similar schemes before and recognized the signs. Whoever it was, That single message had altered the course of her life, had given her the chance to fight back before it was too late. Her phone buzzed with a text from Valora. Rhodes Mercer's appeal was denied today. Thought you'd want to know. Avery smiled slightly. Justice continued its slow, grinding progress. In the months since the preliminary hearing, she had returned to teaching, accepting a position at a small private school in their new town. The principal, impressed by her resilience and academic credentials, had created a special literature program for her to lead. Life was rebuilding itself, piece by piece. She still checked for cameras sometimes, still startled at unexpected sounds in the night. The trauma didn't vanish simply because the danger had passed, but each day brought more moments of peace, more instances where she felt fully present rather than vigilantly scanning for threats. The swing creaked gently as she rocked, watching the first stars appear in the deepening blue sky. Inside the house, Orion slept safely. Tomorrow would bring unpacking, arranging, settling in, normal concerns, ordinary challenges. Avery closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past year begin to lift. They had tried to erase her, to rewrite her story according to their twisted narrative. Instead, she had found her voice, her strength, her indomitable core. In the quiet of her new beginning, Avery Blackwood soon to legally reclaim her maiden name. Avery Castillo made a silent promise to herself and to her son. They would build something beautiful from the ruins of what had been destroyed. They would create a life defined not by what they had survived, but by what they would become. The night deepened around her, peaceful and still. No hidden eyes watched from the shadows. No manipulated recordings captured her movements. Just a woman on a porch swing, free at last to write her own story. When she finally went inside, locking the door behind her with a single, simple deadbolt, Avery felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope, unguarded and bright, lighting her way forward into whatever came next.